Good afternoon, everyone. The BioSpectrum webinar has just started, but we are waiting for more people to join in. So another 5 minutes and the session will roll on. Right. Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you all on behalf of BioSpectrum. Now, BioSpectrum is reaching out to you today through a webinar that has been organized to address a very critical question. That is, how to make India COVID-19 free. What has been done, what is being done, and what more needs to be done. Now, to get answers to these questions, BioSpectrum reached out to a few industry experts and gathered their inputs in the form of video bites. We will be playing those videos for our audience right now. But before we begin, I would like to inform the audience that after the videos have been played, we will be opening the floor for a Q&A session where two experts will be joining us for further interaction with the audience. And the outcome of this webinar will be shared with Dr. Renu Swarup, who is the Secretary of the Department of Biotechnology. So please feel free to raise your queries and concerns. Now let's start with the first input, that is from the vaccine maker, the Serum Institute of India, where we spoke to Dr. Rajiv M. There, who is the executive director, and Dr. Suresh Yadav, again the executive director of the institute. Now let's listen to what they have to say.
Good morning. I am Dr. Zadav from Serum Institute of India, Executive Director. And I have my colleague, Dr. Rajiv Dere,
Hello.
who is also Executive Director and in charge for our all vaccine production, and he is a virologist by profession.
Hello.
So, based upon the current situation of the coronavirus, I would like to ask him, as a virologist, what are the current challenges facing India in countering the fight?
Yes, before addressing the question, let us have some background information. I mean, this is something very new which nobody has ever seen, this virus. Forget about the origin of this virus. Now the virus is in human beings and is being transmitted from human to human. What is happening is, since this virus is new, practically every human being is going to get infected. The success of countering this infection is to drop the number of cases against the time. That would be rated as a success. Why I am saying this? Because there is no standard treatment available, as well as there is no vaccine available. So the only thing which is in our hand is to prolong the period of number of people getting infected at a time. And based on that, we have a classification that the cases are imported, then there are local cases, and then community transmission. Now what is happening since last 5-6 days, if you look at WHO's daily bulletin, every country has started defining what is community transmission, and that has made some confusion, and so in the chart you will find it is rated as pending. So what is confusion is, how do you define the community transmission? What is peculiarly happening in India is, you will find something called as hotspot. Now this is not defined, but hotspot is nothing but the cluster of cases occurring in a particular zone. So in my opinion, if we want to achieve the drop in number of cases versus time, then what is required is strict monitoring of social distancing, avoid gathering of people, and that's the only way we can stop this transmission. And secondly, if we find there is a cluster of infection, then the complete lockdown in the cluster area and then treating them with some preventive thing. I understand at some places people have been distributing hydroxychloroquine as a medicine, preventive medicine. Is not actually, but with some medical care, this appears to be the solution at this time. So till the time vaccine is available, till the time you don't have an official drug available formally, I think social distancing is the only thing. But the challenge is, how do you balance between the daily needs of people and not allowing them to gather, and that is becoming a biggest challenge, in my opinion.
Yeah. But in addition to this, do you feel that the mask is also a important factor in this?
Yeah. I came across a very recent study which was done with coronavirus, flu and rhinovirus, and the normal mask, surgical mask, has ability to retain at least 50% of virus which comes out of as a droplet or some respiratory droplets after sneezing or coughing. This is a proven fact based on all three viruses actually studied. So putting mask on the face is a must, and that is a primary important thing in social distancing.
Sure. Now, what are the resources available within the country, and what more is required to augment the current situation?
I think the resources available is the number of tests that we should carry out. Today, the number of tests that we are carrying out is significantly low. So we are missing lot of asymptomatic carrier which eventually could transmit this and make a hotspot or a cluster. So what is must today is the number of tests that we should carry out. There is also a concept of a pool testing which used to be during a lot of earlier pandemic. So a group of 10 people tested simultaneously could reduce the number of tests, and then if you find in that 10 if the test is positive, then you can go on testing 10.
Indeed.
This is a proven fact. So I can say that if we can increase the number of tests plus some innovative approach in testing, then it will be a better thing to do.
Sure, okay. And what, in your opinion, needs to be done in India to be more prepared for the future pandemics?
I remember in 2007 or 2008 when I attended pandemic preparedness meeting in WHO, almost all cross section of scientists, mathematicians, social science people, they were continuously saying that is not the question whether it will be, when it will be, that was the question. At that time, avian flu actually started this preparedness, pandemic preparedness. There have been various things which have been depicted and various fears that have been created in order to address such situation, including the effect of lockdown, transport, then aviation industry, railways, everyday needs. But I think nobody really believed that there will be one day some pandemic. So actually swine flu and avian flu and SARS and MERS gave us a hint that it is coming, but I don't think anybody has given enough attention to this. So we need to have these quite prepared, including medical equipments, personal protections, masks, surgical equipments, ventilators. There has to have a budget which should be created for pandemic preparedness. I think in short that is a requirement, and we should be learning this after this pandemic. Okay, now since we discussed few things about the impact of COVID on human health and loss of life and etc., but nonetheless it is going to make a bigger impact on economy and especially a growing economy like India. And since you have been talking to various members of CIA and industry fraternity, in your opinion, what are your views that would be impacting the Indian economy, maybe in short term or long term?
Yeah. Dr. Dere, honestly, I am not an economist. Like you, I am also a scientist. But because I am interacting or I am maybe talking to the people, not only in India but outside, I think on Indian economy, this is really going to impact in a big way. And it will take at least another 2-3 years for India to come back to the normal position. What we have seen is that, yes, all the businesses are closed down, except for maybe the small shop owners like vegetable vendors and the chemist. Now, it has impacted tremendously for the daily wage people. All those daily wages people who are working in the shops, in the hotels or in the shanties, they don't know what to do. Yeah. Okay. And honestly speaking, I think government also was not really ready at that time to take a decision what exactly they want to do with these people. Although so many NGOs and government itself has come out to help these guys, but they have suffered the maximum. Apart from that, all big industries are almost now working from home or they have closed down. Automotive industry, heavy engineering, instrumentation, okay, except pharmaceutical industry, all industries are almost closed down. Pharmaceutical industry is allowed to work. They have also faced problems from the local administration for their transportation, for communication, and mainly the issue that I feel has impacted that although the industry is working, there are no sales. There is no transportation. There are no trucks available, no buses, no railways, no airlines, no international airlines. Okay. My information is that there are almost about 45,000 tons of freight material which has come into the country is sitting on the tarmac in Bombay, Delhi or other airports. And unless it is cleared, we cannot get the raw material inside. And then question will come of exporting our material. So even if the material is ready, we cannot export it. And apart from that, I think a situation is coming in the pharma industry because they are working, their storage rooms are getting choked up. They have worked, but because there is no outflow of the material, all that material are choking the cold rooms or their storage places. And this will create, I think, in another, month's time, a very, very severe problem if the transportation and distribution of the medicine does not start immediately. So this is, I have talked about general, I have talked about pharmaceutical, but in general, I think even the World Bank prediction is that Indian economy is one of the very few countries where they have said that it will be growing on the plus side, but that plus is only about 1 to 1.5%.
Yeah, that is surely a big impact. Yes. Thank you, Dr. Dada.
Thank you very much.
Well, that was indeed insightful inputs. Now, moving on, we have our second input that is from the innovation sector from Dr. Taslim Arif Said, who is the CEO and Director of the Center for Cellular and Molecular Platform, CCAM, Bangalore. Now, let's listen to what he has to say.
So good morning, Dr. Taslim Arif Syed. What are so given that the COVID-19 pandemic is here and with its huge economic fallout on the country's economy as well as in the public health system, so there are certain questions that we wanted to get answered from you. So what do you think are the current challenges that India is facing in countering COVID?
Yeah, no. So no, it's I think it's a worldwide, uh, huge global health challenge that we are all facing, which is impacting everyone big time across all countries. Um, and there are issues which many countries are attempting to fight, and of course, India also is facing many challenges, and few challenges definitely include, the early stage of, uh, you know, the diagnostic for people who are symptomatic carriers or asymptomatic carriers, which is going to be a crucial thing, and that is one very important aspect. At the same time, uh, we are facing the availability of diagnostic kits. We are facing availability of personal protective equipment for healthcare professionals, and we are also possibly looking at availability issues of the therapeutic purposes like respiratory aids, ventilators, and other aspects. Having said that, I think India, because of the lockdown, has gotten some time to prepare itself to tackle these challenges, where because of the lockdown, the spread of the infection has possibly shifted a bit further away, giving us the time for India to prepare for diagnostics, availability of resources like PPEs, availability of diagnostic kits, availability of other equipment which are important. So I think that is uh, an aspect that because of the lockdown we have been able to, and we need to work a bit more in terms of preparing ourselves to tackle these challenges.
What are the resources available and what more is required?
So in terms of the, as I said, the previous one, where there has been a availability aspects of many resources worldwide, including PPEs, diagnostic kits, and other ventilators and all. And those are the ones which many health systems around the world are facing a challenge in terms of resources. And I think these are the ones we need to focus on to make available so that we can prevent further spread, test early, test at scale, so that we have an understanding of the level of spread of infection to avoid further infection from the carriers and take care of the individuals who are having uh, intensive uh, effect of the infection. So those resources across PPEs, diagnostics, and other aspects actually are the ones which people are taking care of right now.
What needs to be done so that India is more prepared for a future pandemic situation?
I think this is where uh, I think one can look at it in terms of the long-term perspective. What we have clearly seen is that uh, because this being a worldwide pandemic, uh, clearly the availability of resources became a challenge because of the scale that every country needed it. And India clearly not being the first country to be affected big time, even in March, late March and early April, even we realized the need of resources like PPEs, diagnostic kits, ventilators, etc. I think one thing that actually possibly worked is that the availability of indigenous innovations which were being built over last 8 to 10 years. Because of this availability of the infrastructure and the innovators who are building innovations for a variety of aspects, they have been able to make a small shift in their plan and work towards addressing the need of such resources in COVID-19 situation. And that has been a very important aspect where you have what you call it as the infrastructure, the talent, the innovation temperament, which has been built over last 8 to 10 years, which now possibly would allow us to address the issue of availability, which conventionally we were looking at in terms of importing. And currently, where the importing is not an option or rather is not sufficient, I think this possibly may be the time where inbuilt innovations, local made innovations by Indian innovators may be able to, at least to some extent, will be able to address that challenge. Hopefully, I'm hopeful for that. But that exactly would also allow us to see how we can prepare ourselves to future pandemic. So what it does it require? For anything to be required, you need to have infrastructure, you need to have right system, healthcare system, where which can approve innovations in speedy manner, innovations, supporting innovation is constantly on fast track so that when such pandemic challenges come, it just needs to gear up one notch and not necessarily many notches. And that something India is possibly getting towards, but I think post this, there should be a larger investment in infrastructure, in regulatory approvals, in science and innovation. So we are even much better in our position to respond in such manner.
What are your views of the COVID-19 impact on the Indian economy?
But I can say that it's a global economic impact, not only on India. We would definitely see significant aspects, not only in biotech or bioeconomy, but largely in broad economy. And we are seeing we cannot but accept that there's a huge impact that happens on people, or it's 60 to 70% of people who are being impacted because of their inability to go to work on daily basis. So I think there is going to be an impact, and I do hope it is minimum for the country or also for the country citizens who are not in the as blessed position as a few of us are in terms of ability to work from far and still on the living. Not many are in that shape. So I think those are the ones who are going to be the majorly affected. Of course, the economy at large is going to be affected worldwide.
Okay, I think that's about it. Thanks, Dr. Taslim.
The camp has launched a CCAM COVID-19 Innovation Deployment Accelerator, where we have now around 8 to 10 national and international organizations as partners. We have around 700 odd submissions which have come, where we aim to identify the near deployment ready innovations, select them, and then help them in connecting with government industry to fast track their deployment so that they can help back society. So we will share those details also with BioSpectrum so that they can share with a larger community, and it can reach maximum innovators to leverage the deployment accelerator.
Yes, indeed, BioSpectrum will help in whatever is possible. Now, moving from the innovation sector, we are going to the biosupplier segment, where we have Dr. Preeti V. Varke, who is the Director of Cell Culture and Head of Regulatory Affairs at High Media Laboratories. Now, let's listen to what she has to say.
The biggest challenge that our country is facing right now is the skewed ratio of between population density and the limited resources. We have a doctor ratio of 8 doctors for 10,000 people as opposed to 71 in Korea and 41 in Italy. We have one straight-run hospital for 55,000 people. The biggest challenge that we are facing is the limited resources that we have in terms of our testing capabilities and in terms of our healthcare system. We have 127 ICMR approved government laboratories and 51 private laboratories. We have the capacity to do 13,000 tests per day, and as on date, we are operating at 38% our capacity. Well, testing is the first line of defense against this deadly virus. Korea, which was the second nation to be affected after China, managed to contain the virus without a complete lockdown just by doing mass testing. For a country of 1.3 billion people, how much ever we ramp up our testing capacity, our capacity is always going to be woefully short of the requirement. But what is on our side is first the sun. Right now we are in the hottest months of the year, and if we study the pattern, the occurrence of flu has always been the least in the months of April and May. Second, Indians are biologically much more robust when it comes to immunity. Considering the population dynamics in our country, we cannot bank on mass testing like Korea. We need to scale up the number of testing laboratories and the manufacturing setups involved in the sampling and testing kits. The entire workforce involved in the healthcare system, testing laboratories, manufacturing setups involved in making kits, PPEs, sanitizers should be fully operational. Since we are not self-sufficient and we need to import a lot of critical raw materials, customs and airports should be open on all days for the next 2 months, at least for the critical goods. Supply chain and logistics is a very important part of this chain, and it needs to be agile and seamless. Instead of just focusing on the prevention, what we also need to focus at this point of time is what we can do in case we do get infected by the virus. The key is to keep the immunity high. First, by having a very good diet rich in vitamin C and immune boosters, and second, by exercising and yoga. Traditionally, yoga has been a part of our culture. Surya Namaskar and breathing exercises like Kapalbhati, Ujjayi, Bhasrika increase the samat pran in our body. Samat pran is responsible for maintenance of warmth in our body. So even if you do get the virus, your body can fight it out. It will take 4 to 6 months for the vaccine to come out. Meanwhile, as responsible and conscious citizens, we practice self-isolation, we take good care of our body and health and keep our immunity high so that we do not burden our existing healthcare system. This is High Media's viral transport system. The kit consists of a viral transport medium. The kit also has one nasopharyngeal swab and one oropharyngeal swab. Our kit has been validated by National Institute of Virology. Viral transport medium has been designed to preserve the virus for up to 72 hours. The quality of the VTM is very important because if the virus degrades, then no matter how good your tests are, you will get a false negative result. The first crucial step towards testing is proper sampling. There are two sites from which a sample or a swab is taken. One is the nose and second is the throat. Now this is a nasopharyngeal swab. As you can see, it has a very thin and delicate shaft so that it can easily enter your nasal cavity without damaging the delicate nasal mucosa. You tilt the head backwards. You insert the nasal swab into the nasal cavity so that it touches the posterior nasopharyngeal wall. And how do you know that you have touched the posterior nasopharyngeal wall? You will encounter a resistance when you touch the wall. You stay there for a few seconds, enough for the nasal secretions to be absorbed onto this highly absorbent flocked tip. You remove the swab with rotating motions, open the tube, put the swab, break it at a break point and seal the cap. This is an oropharyngeal swab. As you can see, it is slightly thicker and less flexible than the nasal swab. You again tilt the head backwards. You depress the tongue with a tongue depressor and put the oral swab inside the oral cavity till it reaches the posterior pharyngeal wall. You do not touch the sides of the oral cavity or the tongue or the gums and the teeth. It's a natural reflex that when you put the oral swab into a person's mouth, the person might gag, but you have to keep the swab for sufficient time for the secretions or the proper scrapings to come onto the tip or the oropharyngeal swab. You again remove the swab, open the tube, put it back in the tube. If the oropharyngeal swab has a break point, you can break it, or if it does not have a break point, you just cut it with a scissor and then seal the tube. Considering the shortage of the swabs and all the testing materials, it is okay if you can take both the nasal and the oral swab. In absence of an oral swab, you can just use the nasopharyngeal swab to take both the samples. In that case, first you take the oral swab and with the same swab you insert into the nasal cavity and then remove it by the same procedure and put it into the tube.
Now, we will move on to our last segment where we have an expert from the diagnostic sector, and that is Mr. Satyaki Banerjee, who is the CEO of the medical imaging section at Trivitron Healthcare. Now, let's listen to what he has to say.
The COVID-19 pandemic is a global crisis of unprecedented nature. At the time of this interaction, the virus has infected approximately 1.5 million people globally and has caused the death of more than 80,000 patients. This is a global emergency. The Indian government is faced with the challenge of protecting its 1.3 billion plus population from getting infected by this virus. The government has taken a very logical decision of going for a countrywide lockdown for a period of 21 days. And that has been fairly effective. The total number of registered cases in India is approximately 5,300 out of this global number of 1.5 million. Approximately 15% of COVID-19 patients stand a chance of developing pneumonia, and many of them would need ventilator support. The number of ventilators which are currently active in India, according to various sources, is approximately 50,000. And the country needs a significant large number of ventilators to be manufactured over the next few weeks to be able to manage this crisis. The government of India is actively working with medical device manufacturers across the country to scale up the manufacturing of ventilators. It has also created a consortium bringing in the expertise of automobile manufacturers, other electronic manufacturers, and have asked them to work very closely with the medical device manufacturers to help them develop ventilators rapidly and scale up the manufacturing. That's a prudent step that has been taken. The regulatory agencies, the medical fraternity, and the manufacturers of medical equipment, they have collaborated in this time of need and has come up with specifications and a roadmap to scale up the manufacturing of ventilators. Efforts are being made to manufacture ventilators which can operate in a multitude of environment, even in places where access to compressed air is not available. These ventilators would either have a built-in turbine or a mechanical system to generate the air in the absence of compressors. The Bureau of Indian Standards organized a discussion amongst all stakeholders to come up with a guidance document that would be applicable for the manufacturing of PPEs. The BIS proposes that the fabric and the raw materials which are being used for making of PPEs, they comply with relevant ISO and ASTM standards to offer adequate barrier protection against body fluids and viruses. A cardinal aspect in the effective management of COVID-19 infection control is the availability of personal protective equipment for healthcare professionals who are treating COVID-19 patients. Standards has been made and two agencies has been appointed in the country to regulate the quality of COVID-19 PPE kits. Citra in Coimbatore and DRD in Gwalior has been tasked with this activity. Another important aspect is the availability of hand sanitizers in healthcare centers, hospitals, ICUs, isolation wards, etc. Existing manufacturers as well as a number of new manufacturers has got together and scaled up their production capacity so that there is no shortage of hand sanitizer availability in the country. Diagnostic companies across the country has got together and developed RT-PCR based testing kits for COVID-19. With the rapid scale up in the manufacturing of ventilators, proper guidance documents being available for PPE kits, and manufacturers being encouraged to scale up their manufacturing output of PPE, and diagnostic companies getting together and coming up with RT-PCR based testing systems for COVID-19, the country is gearing up very well to handle this pandemic situation. The impact of the coronavirus pandemic on the global economy is going to be substantial. The United Nations predict that there would be a 1% shrinkage in the global economy in 2020 as compared to the earlier prediction of growth of 2.5%. Financial experts predict that the Indian economy might contract by 4.5% in the current quarter, but as the year progresses, the economy is going to gradually recover. And at the end of this financial year, the Indian economy might actually grow by 2%.
Well, that brings us to the end of the video session, and I'm sure that the audience is ready with their queries and concerns. So, just to let the audience know that right now we have two experts with us, which is Dr. Taslim Arif Said from CCAMP. Sir, can you hear me? Okay, yes, thank you. And we have Mr. Satyaki Banerjee from Trivitron Healthcare. Sir, are you there? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay. So, just to let the audience know that you can start typing in your questions or queries, whatever you have, and that will be flashed on the screen. I would request you to please mention to whom the query is directed whether it's Dr. Tasleem Arif or Mr. Satyaki Banerjee. So it will be easier for them to answer your questions. The floor is now open for the questions. We have a first question now. Anyone can take the question up, please. Would anyone like to answer the first question?
This is the first question.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So I think broadly there are different approaches in terms of the testing being done right now. The most used technique right now has been is RT-PCR, where different kits are also available and different protocols are available, and there are no well-known numbers, but as per the ICMR approval that you would have seen, the ones with the highest percentage of sensitivity, both for positive and negative control, are given the go ahead. But the clear numbers, because we do not have yet the full data, are not available per kit or per protocol person for the percentage of false positive or false negative.
All right. Mr. Satyaki, would you like to add something?
He just said. And at this moment, we are sticking to the ICMR guidelines.
All right. The next question. Anybody can take up the question, please.
Yeah, there are two schools of thoughts regarding the disinfection tunnels. While there is no credible evidence saying that it can disinfect and prevent the spread of COVID-19 infection, there are some reports which states that the health hazard could be much more. So at this moment, there is no scientific evidence which really supports the use of disinfection tunnels. The use of hand sanitizers and washing the hand with soap for 20 seconds is probably the most effective way of preventing the infection, and the use of masks, that's what is being recommended.
All right. Your take, Dr. Saeed?
I agree with him largely. I think personal hygiene is significantly important, both from the sanitizer as well as the other, preventive equipment like mask and other aspects. I think the other approaches may just add, but they cannot be in any way the first order of prevention measures.
All right. So we have a third question on the screen now. Anybody would like to answer this?
So I think I can possibly take it. I think there are attempts being made and a few serological tests based on IgG and IgM coming out. So there is a good progress on that, and I think the attempt is to make them more reliable and much more robust going forward. But there are some serological tests coming out both from India and from other places.
All right. Mr. Banerjee, your take on this? All right. So can we have our next question? Yes, the next question.
Yeah, I think for this one, I think a lot of scientists across the world are attempting to understand more about the COVID-19 mechanism of action, if that's the question that is being asked here. A lot of people are attempting to understand its, viral entry into cells and other aspects. I think it is not yet fully decoded, and I will possibly, but I'm sure a lot of these details will come out in a couple of months as a lot of effort is being made from many labs from different perspective, structural biology.
Dr. Saeed, we're not able to hear you. I think we lost the connection. Mr. Banerjee, would you like to take it up?
Yeah, I would continue from where he left. At this moment, we are trying to decode the exact, way this virus affects the human body, and there is no concrete answer as of now. Uh, and Probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks' time, once we understand this virus a bit better, we should be able to have a more precise answer to this question.
That's true. Maybe a more of whole genome sequencing would also be required,
Yes,
right?
yes, absolutely.
Yes. Okay. So we have a next question now. Would you like to take that up?
Yeah, the most active way to combat this virus, and this is what at least the government of India has done very effectively, is social distancing. And in addition to that, personal hygiene and specifically, washing the hands for 20 seconds, 30 seconds with soap is probably the most effective thing. And covering the nose and the mouth with a mask, preferably a three-ply surgical mask, is very effective. Use of hand sanitizers where access to soap and water is not there. Uh, that would help go quite a lot in preventing the viral infection.
All right, all right. Thank you so much for that. One more question. I think this will be the last question because we'll run out of time. So, what would be the response for this question, sir?
See, to answer this question, if you look at the statistics, but today there are more than 2 million reported COVID-19 cases across the world. And in India, we have been able to control this to a great extent. And while there is a debate going on the sample size that we have taken and how many are getting tested, but the same situation is there all across the world. So in India, as of today, the total number of COVID-19 positive cases are 12,456. And if you look at the population of more than 1.3 billion, that's been a phenomenal control that we have had on the spread of this infection. In terms of readiness, we have approximately, like the other speaker presented, 127 ICMR approved government labs and 51 private labs for testing. And right at this moment, there are 586 COVID-19, oriented medical centers with 1 lakh isolation beds available. We have approximately 50,000 numbers of active ventilators installed all across the country. And the government is working very closely with manufacturers, and we are scaling up the manufacturing of ventilators. So over the next couple of months' time, we would have approximately 10 to 15,000 new ventilators, which would be installed all across the country. So in terms of our preparedness, we are fairly well prepared to handle this pandemic.
All right, all right. So that was very insightful. Thank you, sir. And we had lost Dr. Saeed before, but he's back. So would you like to add anything as your last minute thoughts here for the session?
No, not sure what last question, but sorry that I I had to drop out. But I think there are very exciting efforts being done across India for interventions for COVID-19 health scare. And I think from a perspective of diagnostics, even ventilators, or even disinfectant and environmental load reduction of viruses, many interesting innovations are being done, and we at CCAMP have launched an accelerator to cover those innovations and help them do the last mile. So we'll be happy to support any such innovations which can be of use within a couple of months.
Well, indeed. Thank you. Thank you so much. So, we would be wrapping up the session now. And the audience, if they have more questions, you can always email to the ID which is available on your screen right now. And I would like to thank Mr. Satyaki Banerjee and Dr. Taslim Arif Saeed for their time and taking part in the webinar. And I would also like to thank all our audiences, which have been so supportive throughout the webinar. Thank you so much for participating. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care and stay safe.
Stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.